जी चलिए, अस्सलाम वालेकुम. This is Dr. Sonia here with the last bit of the general embryology. We've done all the different stages in the development. We've talked about the fetal period as well. What are all the tests? What are all the developments? What time, what ages give you what different types of steps, and how the final result of the fertilization is going to be there. Now we're going to talk about something which is going to be in relation with the developing embryo. That is what we call as fetal membranes and the placenta. But the placenta is not as much important for you people in the BDS, but so we will not talk about that, but just a few words about the some of the fetal membranes which are important and they are related. In the fetal membranes, what exactly we mean is the membranes which are around, which make the baby survive. That is, and they play a function. That is, one is the chorion, that was the outside the chorionic cavity. Then is the amnion that covers the amniotic cavity, that forms the amniotic cavity, the umbilical vesicle, that is your yolk sac, and then the allantois, which was a projection, a tail-like projection from the posterior aspect of the yolk sac. These constitute the fetal membranes. That is something which is around the developing fetus, and they take part in the growth of the baby. ये आगे नहीं हो रहा बच्चे हो गया Now then the placenta and the fetal membranes as a whole, they perform the following functions and activities: generalized protection, nutrition, respiration, excretion, and hormone production. So that is nearly, you can say that they are helping the baby to survive in the intrauterine life. That is, they are protecting it, they are providing it nutrition, they are helping him in the respiration, the hormone productions, which are going to maintain the pregnancy or the fertilization, and help in the excretion, because the organs of the baby, they are not independently functioning as yet. The baby is dependent on the mother. So then placenta and fetal membranes are expelled from the uterus as after birth. That is what the baby passes out, and then all these membranes are going to pass out of the uterus at the time of birth. That is why these are going to follow, and they are given the name as after birth. Then we come down to a very important part of this, the fetal membranes, that is the amniotic cavity or the amniotic sac and the amniotic fluid. If you remember, we talked about the test, what we called as amniocentesis. And we said that amniocentesis can be performed in a very early stage, and you can do all sorts of tests with the amniotic fluid and assess whether the baby, developing baby, is normal, the time period, all the sorts of tests that are there. So we're going to talk about how the amniotic cavity is formed, what does it contain, what is its function, and so forth. Amniotic sac, you can call it, or you can call it the amniotic cavity. It's nearly the same thing. The amniotic sac, commonly called the bag of waters, that is because it contains your amniotic fluid. So the bag of waters is also a term used for the amniotic sac. Sometimes it is called as the amniotic membrane, is the sac in which the fetus develops. That means the baby, because this amniotic cavity is going to encircle the developing fetus all around. So this is the sac in which the fetus develops. And so it plays very number of important functions. It is a thin but tough transparent pair of membranes that hold a developing embryo or fetus until shortly before birth, because the amniotic fluid or the bag is going to rupture, and that is a sign of onset of labor. So before that, it's a thin pair of membranes. The inner of these fetal membranes is the amnion, and encloses the amniotic cavity containing the amniotic fluid. And the outside of the membrane is the chorion, because I'll show you a picture so you can recollect what exactly was the presentation. Contains the amnion, and it's part of the placenta, that is the chorion, that is the outer layer, which is going to be ultimately occupied by the amnion and the amniotic cavity, and chorion, they just become one layer. On the outer side, the amniotic sac is connected to the yolk sac, allantois, via the umbilical cord. We'll have a few words about the development of the umbilical cord as well. If you see and recollect this picture starting at different stages, this is thin but tough transparent membrane, that is this fluid structure which was small and then gradually it is increasing in size, and you can see that the chorionic cavity, that is the brownish structure, that is covered by the chorion. This is ultimately all completely occupied by the amniotic cavity. This is the blue thing, that is the blue sac. So it just becomes one smooth chorion, and that is going to take part in the development of the placenta, and the amniotic cavity with the fluid in it is going to be the main structure in which the baby is going to float and it is going to develop. So you can see, if you see this picture, so the thin but tough transparent membrane, that is amnion, forms a fluid-filled membranous amniotic sac that surrounds the embryo and the fetus. Amnion is attached to the margins of the embryonic disc, that is in the front, where you have this amnioectodermal junction, that is the amniotic cavity, which is going to extend from where you had the inner cell mass giving rise to your, there was a epiblast, and then you had a hypoblast. Hypoblast was your endoderm and epiblast was your ectoderm. So this is in continuation of the ectoderm. I will show you a picture. Okay. So it is located on the ventral surface, future umbilicus after the umbilical folding. If you can see this white is the amniotic cavity, and this outside is the chorionic cavity. This ultimately, when the amniotic, in the second picture you can see, then the amniotic cavity that has almost completely covered the chorionic cavity, and it's just the chorion, which is the membrane which is there. So it is located, and on this ventral aspect, it is located on the ventral surface after the embryonic folding, when there is there on the side transverse surface and cephalocaudal folding. As the amnion enlarges, it gradually obliterates. You can see that the amniotic cavity, there is no more as the chorionic cavity, it's just being occupied by the amniotic cavity. The chorionic cavity is obliterated and forms the epithelial covering of the umbilical cord. Amniotic fluid plays a major role in the fetal growth and development, because it is going to provide space. Now, what exactly is the few couple of steps in which the development of the amniotic sac takes place? Starts at the beginning of the second week, and so you can say it is the bilaminar structure. Bilaminar structure, epiblast and hypoblast. So recollect that where we are. So at that stage, a cavity appears when the inner cell mass, that was your embryoblast, or you can call it, and in the embryoblast you have the epiblast and the hypoblast. The embryoblast, when it enlarges, it becomes the amniotic cavity, right? So trophoblast, the other layer was the trophoblast, which was on the outside, and embryoblast was, which was epiblast and hypoblast. Okay, this is going to extend as the amniotic cavity. The epiblastic cells, which were the upper ones, and the hypoblast, they are the lower ones. These migrate between the embryoblast and the trophoblast. Trophoblast was on the outer side, the cells dividing on the outer side, they were called the trophoblast, and inner were the hypoblast. So some cells which are called as the epiblastic cells, they are going to extend between these two layers. So you can say epiblast is a part of your embryoblast. They're going to extend upwards between the trophoblast and the embryoblast. Cells which are present between the embryoblast and the trophoblast are called these cells which are going to extend in between and form a cover, a sac. They are called the amnioblast, or the flattened cells. These flattened cells are what exactly are going to form the sac, which is called your amniotic sac. As the implantation blastocyst persists, the amnioblasts separate from the epiblast and line the amnion. That means they have separate cells developing from the epiblast. They are going to extend inwards and line the sac, which is called the amniotic cavity, and which encloses the amniotic cavity, and these are then called as myeloblasts. The epiblast is going to form the floor of the amniotic cavity, is the continuous periphery with the amnion. You see this picture, this blue is your embryoblast, and then outside the greenish is your trophoblast. This cavity which is there, this is extending upwards, and that is lined by those blue cells, which are your basically amyloblast, or forming the amnion, and the cavity they are forming, covering, is your amniotic cavity, and the cells which are lining, they are called as your amyloblasts. So that is forming the amniotic cavity, and these cells which are the epiblast cells, they are going to ultimately become into your ectodermal cells, and below where you have the hypoblast, they are going to ultimately become your endoderm, and in between these two, where you have the primitive streak, then you have the invagination notochord, then you develop into the mesoderm. So that is how the arrangement is going to be. So if I hope you remember with this diagram exactly, the blue, that is a big one between the two cavities, that is your embryoblast, and that on the outer side, that is light green and dark green, that is the trophoblast. The cavity is cells from this epiblast is going to extend upwards between the trophoblast and the embryoblast, encircle a space, and this space is ultimately going to be called as your amniotic cavity. And the cells which are lining, they are going to be called as the aminoblast, and the epiblast, which is at the base of this cavity, is going to form the floor of the cavity. And so the ultimate lining of the cavity is going to be called as the aminoblast cells, and the epiblast is ultimately going to become your ectoderm. When this cavity is formed by the fusion of the parts of the then you have these amniotic folds which were there on the anterior end and onto the posterior end. These which make its appearance first at the cephalic and the caudal. And if you see that these folds, then they are going to subsequently caudal and sides of the embryo. As the amniotic fold arises, the fuses over the dorsal aspect of the amniotic cavity is formed. That is, from cephalocaudal folding is there, and from side to side the folding is there. If you see all in this picture, then this is that there is a fold is formed which is encircling the amniotic cavity, and this amniotic cavity is going on to the ventral aspect because of this folding. If you see in the C picture, and then ultimately into the D, where you have this blue is your ectoderm, so it is going to be an amnioectodermal junction, and that is on the ventral surface where you have this vitelline duct or your yolk sac. At that end there is a communication. Then this forms there is the formation of the liquor ami, or the amniotic fluid that is there, which is also called the liquor amini. This amniotic fluid is how is it secreted and how does it circulate. Initially, when the amnioblast cells are forming, it is formed by a small amount is secreted by the amniotic cells themselves. Then from the maternal tissue and the interstitial fluids by diffusion across the chorionic membrane from the maternal side. So that is in this, if you see this previous picture, if you see in this picture, it's just the maternal tissue on the outside, amniotic cavity, and the chorionic membrane both on the outside. So from the maternal tissue, there is going to be permeation through this chorion and amnion membrane, that is the two, and entering into the amniotic fluid. So that is another way, from maternal tissue and the interstitial fluid diffusion across the amnion-chorionic membrane, then diffusion of fluid through the chorionic plate, that is where we have the chorionic cavity, from the blood in the intervillous spaces of the placenta, that is on the outside where your trophoblast is forming the placenta. From that chorionic plate, from the blood in the intervillous spaces, fluid permeates into it and forms a part of your amniotic fluid. Then fluid is also secreted by the fetal respiratory and gastrointestinal tracts. And of course, we still continue with the ball from where all it is doing. Daily rate of contribution is said to be 300 to 400 ml. It is also formed by transudate from the fetal blood vessels across the fetal skin. And then it is 11th week onwards, the most important contributing factor is the fetus contributes to the amniotic fluid by excreting urine into the amniotic cavity. This fluid is also swallowed in by the baby and then passed out as urine. So it said that formerly it was thought that it is the major component of the amniotic cavity is contributed by the urine of the baby, but then all these small contributions have also come to be known that they are also going to contribute. It's just on 11th week onwards, this fetus contribution is by the kidneys from the fetus into the amniotic fluid. So by late pregnancy, approximately it is said 500 ml of urine is added daily, because it is about 1 liter in capacity. The volume of amniotic fluid increases slowly, reaching up to 700 to 1000 ml, or you can say 1 liter by 37th week. That is till the end. So gradually it is increasing. It is going through a circulation, but it is gradually increasing. 300 to 400 ml are daily formed. They are taken in by the baby. They go into a circulation and then they are added. So gradually the increase is as the baby going to increase. Sometimes the level is going to fall in the production of the liquor amni, or then ultimately at term, that is 37 to 40 weeks, the final amount is there, that is 700 to 1000 ml. What is the composition of amniotic fluid? It is said it is 99% water. It has equal parts of organic and inorganic salts. Half of it is protein, other half is carbohydrates, fats, enzymes, hormones, and pigments. They are present in the first. The amniotic fluid is mainly water with electrolytes, but after about 12 to 14 weeks, the liquid, they say that all these proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, urea, all they are added up, and they help in fetus to grow. As pregnancy advances, then there is, first it is just a nutritious substance, then as the pregnancy advances, fetal feces and the urine, both they are added up into the amniotic fluid. It becomes turbid as the skin cells or the lango hair and sebaceous material, that is vernix caseosa, all that is added because that is covering the embryo. So everything is going to be added up into the amniotic fluid. So that is why, what is the significance of amniocentesis? That is, you can do, because it has so many things in it, you can test all these things via the test what we call as amniocentesis, taking in a portion of the fluid and then test it, because the baby is floating into this amniotic fluid, and that is why all the components of the skin are coming directly in contact. So we can do a number of tests. So you can understand the importance of the amniotic fluid and the test amniocentesis. Amniocentesis, you can study the chromosomal abnormalities because the skin cells are also found in floating in the amniotic fluid. So you can do chromosomal abnormalities, that is karyotyping can be done, levels of alpha fetoprotein, that is neural tube defects, we said, proteins, fetal enzymes, hormones, all these tests can be done through this amniocentesis, and that is through this fluid that is being produced, and it has so much contribution, and it is such an important fluid, and so it gives you a very good idea about many factors of the developing embryo. So that is why the important significance is amniocentesis for chromosomes, for alpha fetoproteins, that is chemical, and then fetal enzymes for the chromosomal tests and the hormones. So this is the significance of fetal amniocentesis. So circulation of amniotic fluid, what exactly is its role? The water content of fluid is said to changes every 3 hours. That is because it's being produced, it is being absorbed, it is swallowed, it is thrown out. So that is all what is its circulation. It is being produced, it is swallowed in by the baby, then it is passed out as the urine from the baby through its kidney. So that is the circulation goes into the amniotic cavity. Then there it passes on through the amniochorionic membrane between the chorion to the mother to the placenta. Through the placenta, there is an exchange of the materials. That is, it is also we talk about the functions. So then you will understand what all circulation is going on. It's not a static fluid. That is, it is just produced and the baby is swimming in it. It has many functions to perform. So large amounts of water pass through the amniochorionic membrane. That is, we said the amniotic membrane and the chorionic membrane, the two are nearby because the chorionic cavity is now occluded because of the enlargement of the amniotic cavity. These from through that these two membranes into the maternal tissue and enter the uterine capillaries where all exchanges are going to occur. An exchange of fluid with fetal blood also occurs through the umbilical cord. So all these exchange of chemicals, hormones, everything is taking place. 5th month onwards, the amniotic fluid is swallowed by the fetus and absorbed by the fetus respiratory and the digestive tracts. Okay, that so the baby is going to swallow it, and so if these two systems, anything is there abnormal in these two systems developmentally, then you can see that the normal amount of the amniotic fluid will either increase or either it will decrease. We'll go on to the abnormality soon. The fluid then passes into the fetal bloodstream, and the waste products in it are going to cross the placental membrane and enter into the maternal blood in the intervillous space. So there is going to be an exchange through this amniotic fluid, and then via the chorionic cavity into the maternal blood, and there from the placenta it's going to exchange. Excess water in the fetal blood is excreted by the fetal kidneys and returned to the amniotic sac through the fetal urinary system. So it is swallowed in through the respiratory tract and it is excreted out through the kidneys, and so it is again going to go into the amniotic sac. So coming in from the amniotic sac and being expelled out into the amniotic sac, and so also certain toxic materials, they are passed out via the chorionic cavity to the maternal blood, that is through the placenta, and there the exchange takes place. So all this is a circulation of the amniotic fluid. The full term, the amount is roughly 1 liter or 1000 ml. That is, it's still going to be there, but all the time this amniotic fluid is going to be in circulation. The volume at different levels, the volume changes. The volume of amniotic fluid increases with the growth of the fetus gradually. The amount of fluid increases from 30 ml at 10th week. At 20th week, it becomes 450 ml, and at 1000 ml at 37th week. That is, at term, it is 1000 ml. So 30, then 450, and then it's going to go into 800 to 1000 ml. In the 10th to 11th week, the breathing and swallowing of the fetus slightly decreases the amount, because we say that from 11th week onwards, the baby is going to swallow in the amniotic fluid. So then we expect to have slight decrease in the level of the amniotic fluid. The amount of fluid declines to roughly 400 ml at 42 weeks. Then there is about an increase about because of this swallowing and then being excreted. This is about end pay. There is going to be 500 cc to 1 liter of amniotic fluid at birth. So at times when the baby starts to swallow, at times it is going to decrease in amount, and then gradually it is going to roughly increase in amount. What are the functions that are being performed by the amniotic fluid? Amniotic cavity is formed. The fluid is the thing which is basically going to perform the functions along with the amniotic sac. The swallowed amniotic fluid, it's going to create around 10 to 11 week, creates the urine and contributes also to the formation of the meconium. That is, it is taken in by the gastrointestinal tract, so it contributes to the meconium. Meconium is a grayish stool first for 1 or 2 days that the baby passes. That is called meconium. So because it is swallowed in by the baby, this amniotic fluid, so it also goes to create in the formation of the urine plus in the formation of the meconium. Then amniotic fluid, because the baby is floating into this fluid, it protects the developing baby by cushioning it. How? One is against blows to the mother's abdomen, so it is in a fluid-filled bag and the baby is covered from all sides, and in the labor uterine contractions all the time, because when the baby in the uterine contractions, it is the muscles constrict and compress the baby. It is the amniotic. The baby can be suffocated, so it is going to be protected from the immense pressure of the uterine contractions as well. So these two are the very important factors which the amniotic fluid is going to perform. That is a cushioning effect. It is promoting the muscular skeletal development. That is, if there is plenty of amniotic fluid, baby is free to float in that amniotic fluid, then the development of the bones and the muscular skeleton is going to be the very good. That is, it's going to be free. No. Then amniotic fluid is swallowed by the fetus, helps in the formation of the gastrointestinal tract. That is, stimulates that. It also prevents the fetus from mechanical jerks and shocks. That is because of the cushioning effects. Then it provides room around the fetus, allowing for easier fetal movement. Because, so you can say it's like in a water tank, the baby is floating and movement is free. And it is not a limited movement. Because then that is going to give symmetrical external growth, because the baby is free on all sides, so the growth on both the sides is going to be equal. And then free fetal movements with the walls of the uterus, that again free movements, and then they prevent the skin adherence, that is from one part fixing to the other. So all these, because it is having a free space around, that is going to help the baby to progress, easier fetal movements, which also play a part in the development. Then you have the amniotic fluid maintains the temperature, because baby still doesn't have the maintenance capacity as yet, temperature maintenance by the mother. So amniotic fluid is to some extent maintaining the temperature as well. By the mother fetus, loss of heat and metabolism, it's all being regulated. Then during childbirth, the amniochorionic membrane forms, that is where you have the junction of the two membranes, that is the amnion and the chorionic membrane. They form a hydrostatic wedge that helps to, that is, they produce a space, that is, they help in to stimulate the dilatation of the cervical canal or the birth canal. So at the time of labor, this amniotic cavity along with the chorionic cavity, they both are going to help the membranes, they are going to help in the dilatation of the cervical canal. They sort of a wedge, that is, they provide space or a pressure or making a space, that is, they're going to fix into that cervical canal and dilating it so and making the baby to pass through that dilated canal. That is what exactly it means, that through the, because otherwise the cervical canal is narrow and the baby cannot pass. It has to, the birth canal has to be dilated, and that dilatation process is being performed by the amniotic chorionic membrane. They sort of form a space and they dilate that canal so that the baby can pass through it. They help in initiating the dilatation of the birth canal. Then, so the broad functions that the amniotic fluid is performing, if you recollect it, how is it formed? It is formed from maternal plasma and passes through the fetal membranes by the osmotic and hydrostatic pressure. It is also contributed by the, in the end, by the fetal urine. Fetus, the fluid is a protective liquid, major role in fetal growth and development. I told you, because it is free, the baby has ample space to grow in all directions. Serves to facilitate exchange of nutrients, water, biochemical products between the mother and the baby through the amniotic chorionic membrane. It serves as a cushion, and then kidneys begin to function about 16th week. Fetal urine is also contributed to the fluid. So it is taken in, it is passed out. It's not, so it can say it is it being swallowed in and it is being taken out, and also fetal urine contributes to the fluid. Now the importance of, what is the importance of amniotic fluid? The level can increase, it can decrease, and that both conditions can be very significant. That is, it can be increased in amount. That is polyhydramnias. Poly is, number is greater. Anything written as poly means the amount is more. So that is polyhydramnias. Hydramnia is this amniotic fluid. The fluid that is in the amnios, that is the amniotic cavity. So that is excessive quantity. Polyhydramnias means an excess volume of amniotic fluid in the amniotic sac. We said it is about 1000 ml, or you can say 1 liter. But in polyhydramnias, it goes on to 1500 to 2000 ml. So that is polyhydramnias. What can lead to polyhydramnias? In fetal causes, now we say that the baby swallows this amniotic fluid. Supposing there is anencephaly, that is, the baby doesn't have a development of the brain and the head and neck. That means no mouth, so the baby cannot swallow the fluid, and the fluid is all the time being produced and it is going to be stored in the amniotic cavity. So that is going to increase the level of the amniotic fluid, no swallowing reflex. Then esophageal atresia. Esophageal atresia, when there is esophagus or the food pipe is developing, there is narrowing. It does not dilate or reach its normal level. So that atresia is not going to allow the amniotic fluid to be swallowed in. When the baby swallows it in, because it doesn't go down into the intestines and the stomach, because your food pipe is blocked. It is atresia. No amniotic fluid can pass in the gut. So all is still being collected in the amniotic sac. So the amount is still increasing. It is becoming polyhydramnias. Multiple gestations. If there's going to be double the amount, because if there are two babies, each baby is going to have its individual amount. So it is going to be 2, 3, 4, all the amount of the, each is needing its own amniotic fluid levels for its development. So the amount would be going to be a polyhydramnia. So you can call it that sort, is in a sort of a physiological manner, but this is pathological increase. That is polyhydramnias. In fetus, these reasons can be there, and in the mother, it's the diabetic mother that increases polyuria, that is going to cause the reason for polyhydramnias. Then you can have less of amniotic fluid, that is olighydramnias. Olig means very little. So when you say from nearly less than 500 ml, that is we had 1 liter or 1000 ml, then it goes to less than 500 ml, it's going to be called as the oligohydramnios. Fetal causes urinary tract is not functioning normally, so that urine is not adding on to the fluid into the amniotic cavity. Urinary malformations. So any abnormalities, that was any blockage. So because of the abnormal kidneys which are there, that is, or the any pathway, that is, it can be ureter, urinary bladder, or the urethra, it's going to not add to the amniotic fluid, so it results in oligohydramnios. In the maternal causes, where maternal hypertension, vessels become narrow, there is lack of tissue fluid that is going to pass out from the vessels. So decreased production due to inadequate blood flow when the vessels are narrow. That can lead into oligohydramnios, because we said from the mother, from the blood vessels, it is one of the cause which is leading into the formation of the amniotic fluid. So the significance of these polyhydramnios and oligohydramnios is that when you recollect what are the factors which are contributing to the amniotic fluid, that will help you to say whether what factors, if they are absent, can lead to polyhydramnios, and what factors, if they are absent or they are not functioning normally, whether fetal or maternal, they can lead to oligohydramnia. So it is a cycle which you should understand and appreciate, if what all causes contribute to your amniotic fluid normally, and if they are obstructed somewhere, or if there is an imbalance between this normal production which can lead to oligohydramnios, what factor can lead to increase in amount, that is polyhydramnios, or what can lead to less amniotic fluid. So these are the causes, these are the two terms which are there, which is very important. So what complications can result when we have amniotic fluid is decreased or increased? Too little amniotic fluid, that is oligohydramnios, causes or an indication of problems for the mother and the baby, because the baby is not free to flow, functioning is not normal, it doesn't act as a wedge for the dilation of the birth canal. So an early rupture, early start of labor, all these factors they play because of this less amount of the amniotic fluid, because the baby is developing and this amniotic fluid is playing a very big role. So all those factors lead to an emergency state. The majority, they say the pregnancies, the baby is born healthy, maybe the cells are lost, it becomes dry, because amniotic fluid comes direct in contact with the baby cells, which is being protected by the vernix caseosa. But when there is an increase or decrease, all those factors can be affected. Babies with too little amniotic fluid can develop contractures of the limbs, clubbing of the feet and hands, and also develop a life-threatening condition called the hypoplastic lungs, because we've said there is a formation or contribution from the, because of the swelling, the formation of this respiratory pathway. That is called the Porter's sequence. There's a contractures. I will show you a picture what we call as the amniotic bands, because when the cavity is just empty, all the amniotic membrane that is going to be just sticking on to the baby's body, this is going to act as bands or cut off the normal development of the baby. I'll show you that is, it can lead into that. Small underdeveloped lung doesn't develop normally, potentially fatal, can lead to either perinatal death, or the baby can die shortly after birth due to inadequate oxygenation, because it does not, it leads to immaturity as well. Amount of fluid is not produced, lungs are not properly developed to inadequate oxygenation, and the baby dies before, immediately after birth, or immediately after birth. Then oligohydramnios can be caused by infection, kidney dysfunction, or malformation, or your CVS, or post-preterm premature rupture of membranes. That is because baby is still small and the functioning, the development is not normal, it is not complete. So there can be, when there is leaking, when the membranes rupture, amniotic fluid is lost, that leads to oligohydramnios. And even if you want to take time for the baby to become full term, that becomes difficult, that can lead to complications. It can be treated with bed rest, oral and IV hydration fluid, so that we try to add up to the amniotic fluid. antibiotics to prevent any infection, steroids, and that is on the last resort in the emergency cases, so that the baby is protected, and amniotic fluid fusions are given so as to bring up the level of the amniotic fluid to normal, keep the baby warm and moist. Because if the fluid is lost, the baby which was floating in that fluid sac is going to be all dry. This is going to be because of the Ewing hydramnios. Then a rare but often fatal condition can occur both for the mother and the child, that is amniotic fluid embolism. That is, at times this fluid, small part of it is sucked in by the baby or by the mother, and that leads to embolism, that is a block of the some respiratory pathway leading into death. That can be a fatal condition, that is death is ultimate. Both conditions associated with an increase in the incidence of birth defects is both are associated. That is, Oleg plus polyhydramnias with the increase in the incidence of birth defect. Primary causes of hydramnias, that is, increased or decreased, they say idiopathic. Cause is not known. Roughly, that is 35% is idiopathic. You cannot label the cause. Maternal diabetes is a very important factor. 25% they say leads to either of this condition. Congenital malformation, CNS disorders. I told you, anencephaly. Baby cannot swallow. Gastrointestinal defects. Baby cannot take in the amniotic fluid. So all that is going to lead into either increase or decreased levels of the amniotic fluid. Oligohydramnias is a rare occurrence that may result from renal agenesis. Kidneys are not developed at all. Urine is not contributing to the amniotic fluid. So your fluid is negligible. It is oligohydramnias is there. That is, but it is very rare that the kidneys are not developed. It may be that just small blockage is there that can lead to less of production of fluid, but not complete blockage. Premature rupture, if the baby is not full term and the membranes are ruptured, that is one of this important rupture is the amniotic cavity. The sac is ruptured, fluid passes out, so that means it is going to with result or end with oligohydramnias. The most common cause of preterm labor, that is before labor, premature babies are then given birth to so as to protect the baby from dying. Premature rupture of the amnion, the most common cause of preterm labor, occurs in 10% of the pregnancies. That is, they produce a premature baby, that is before time, and they try to treat the baby by all those giving intravenous if they need to take time, the IV fusions, drugs, fluids, rest, so as to maintain the level so that the baby can reach to a more near to the mature level of birth, that is around 38 to 40 weeks. If still not, then a preterm labor is inevitable and the baby is born, and they say it occurs in about roughly 10% of the cases where you have premature babies where you cannot stop, because once the rupture of the amniotic cavity starts, amniotic sac or the fluid is leaked out, you cannot stop. That is the initial most important sign of start of labor. So that is a preterm labor has started and occurs in 10% of the pregnancies without any reason, maybe any damage, maybe any trauma that can lead to that. And then if the time is not complete, you cannot do anything, and then you develop or you give birth to a premature baby. So this is the importance of amniotic cavity. It performs normal functions. Increased and decreased levels are due to certain reasons. If you know the rotation or the cycle that is occurring, which is by the amniotic fluid, then you can understand how the amount can be decreased or less and what should be the complications be. So that is why you are all the time checked. On every prenatal visit, the obstetrician measures the patient's fundal height. That is, it's with a measure tape, and that is shows you the amniotic fluid increasing, because you cannot measure hold the baby from away from the rest of the things. The fundal height gives you a very good idea that the amniotic fluid or the amniotic sac is developing in the normal pace. And then the ultrasounds, also routinely done, give an indication of proper fetal growth and amniotic fluid development. So fundal height is in the uterus, that is the fundus portion. You do a physical examination You just take your hand up on the mother's abdomen, and you see the level, at what level the fundus is reaching, till where you can feel the uterus, at what height. Then you assess it with the dates, that, and this, if the mother says this is the date, that is, I am having the expectation, that is starting from the conception, and then so you count the number of months or the number of weeks, and then you assess that it is at this place. Then you have a rough idea. You have marked the levels that it should be at this week. The fundal height, that is the uterine growth, should have gone up to this level. So if it is not at that level, then you are concerned that whether it is going into polyhydramnias or oligohydramnias. So the height of the uterus is assessed, giving, that is what we call as the fundal height, that is the height of the uterus which is increasing upwards. That gives you an idea how the amniotic fluid is also developing. And same is the case with the ultrasound, that you give you an idea of the proper fetal development and the amniotic fluid. Then we go on to what are amniotic bands. We said tears in the amnion results in the amniotic band that may encircle part of the fetus, because if the amniotic fluid is torn, fibrotic structures are made, and these fibrotic structures then encircle the limbs and the digits, because it just sticks, the amniotic sac just sticks to the baby, and this fibrotic tissue, it is going to encircle the limbs and the digits, and then these can cut into the development of the limbs or the fingers. Amputations, ring constrict that area, and other abnormalities, including craniofacial deformities, may result. That is, they limit, they constrict that area, blood supply is limited, or they don't let that area to develop. So infection or toxic results that involve either the fetus, fetal membranes, or both can lead to these amniotic bands, because then your amniotic cavity is damaged. Bands then form from the amnion like a scar tissue, constricting the fetal structures. So all these infection, toxic substance, all this can lead to those bands. If you see this amniotic adhesions and band syndrome, all these constrictions, that is, the fluid was very little. Because of the little fluid, the amniotic sac came very close to the baby, and that the fibrotic scar was formed. That fibrotic scar constricted the limb. In this, it is just a constriction of the development. In this, it constricted it, as it nearly amputated. That is, it cut the developing foot or limbs, or the digits can be damaged by just constricting that area. So these are what we call as amniotic adhesions or band syndrome. That is, it when it comes very close, fluid is less, these form a fibrotic scar, and they just constrict a certain area and they damage it. Either they just cut it off, or they just constrict its development, taking it into a hypodevelopment. So that was about the amniotic cavity and the amniotic fluid, what are its functions, so you can understand what is the significance of amniocentesis. Next, a few words about the umbilical cord, which is also related to it. The oval amino-ectodermal junction, that is when you have the cephalocaudal folding and side-to-side folding, the embryoblast that comes forward, it forms a curved flexed structure. So that is, it is an amino, that is the ectodermal junction is the primitive umbilical ring. If you see this picture with the folding, you have this amino-ectodermal junction. This is ectoderm is on the outer layer, and this is the amniotic cavity, that is the vibe that is there on the ventral aspect, and that small is your primitive umbilical ring, all those structures which are entering the baby. This contains ring, this is roughly in the 5th week, that is when your uh, folding is done. It contains your connecting stalk containing the allantois, umbilical vessels, 2 arteries, 1 vein, yolk sac stalk, vitelline duct, vitelline vessels, canal connecting intraembryonic and extraembryonic cavities. If you see this, all these structures which are entering or leaving, they are a part of your primitive umbilical cord. Gradually, when the cavity enlarges rapidly, envelops the connecting and the yolk sac stalks, that becomes nearly the primitive umbilical cord. This is your primitive umbilical cord. It just constricts it, and then this is what we call as the primitive umbilical cord. Then when we talked about the development, we said that because these intestines, they are large, abdomen size is not appropriate. Some of the intestines, they are going to protrude into the abdomen, leading into what we call as the physiological herniation. So you can see these intestines which are protruding out into the umbilicus, and they are all linked to the chorion. That is the yolk sac stalk. That is, it is going to be constricted. The yolk sac stalk was large first, but then it is going to be constricted in size. So all these structures are part of it. These are the yolk sac and the vitelline vessels that you're there. This is the connecting stalk. So all these is your primitive umbilical ring, and these are the contents. And ultimately, when the abdomen size increases, these intestines are going to go back into the abdomen, right? So the primitive cord, then distally the cord contains the yolk sac stalk and the umbilical vessels. Proximally contains some loops and the remnants of the allantois. Then the yolk sac, the chorionic cavity, all this which is component, if you secant that, the yolk sac, it's shrinking and is obliterated. The allantois, it is, and the vitelline ducts, all these vessels are also obliterated. Only remains in the cord is what you see. This is cord are the umbilical vessels in the umbilical vessels, and surrounded by this Wharton jelly that is on the outside, that is to protect these vessels which are supplying blood from the placenta. This is connecting via the placenta to the baby inside, that is the blood circulation, and that's to prevent the vessels from collapsing. This Wharton jelly that is encircling the blood vessel. So all what you have is the umbilical vessel, that is two arteries, one vein surrounded by the Wharton jelly, that is the final umbilical cord that remains. What can the umbilical cord abnormalities be? The normal diameter is 2 centimeters and length is about 50 to 60 centimeters long. Don't say inches, it's centimeters. If it is long, it can have a small tortuous. The artery, because of its length, can be slightly twisted. That can cause false knots. That is, it's not exactly a knot that is formed. It's just a constriction or a bend that is giving the name of false knot. I show you in the next picture. If you see in this C picture, this false knot, that is of the tortuosity, the baby structure, that is giving a sort of a constriction or a narrowing, that is, it's going to cause as a false knot. Then the cord can be too long. It encircles the neck, prolapse usually without increased risk. That can be there. But if it is prolonged labor is there, then the pressure of the uterus, it can constrict the baby, and because the cord can constrict the neck, if it is around the neck of the baby, it can constrict and the baby can be suffocated. Too short a cord, difficulty in detaching at the time of delivery. So it's very short. It cannot allow the uterus to be, the placenta to be detached at the time of delivery. So that becomes a problem, and that leads to a prolonged labor. Then rarely it can be just one umbilical artery that can lead to a cardiac and vascular defects, because the baby would be having less amount of circulation. True knots, that is a tight knot can be formed. If you see in this one, you see false knot and true knot. There is a difference between the two. That can lead to a constriction, and constriction of the blood vessels that can lead to the blood flow, affecting the blood flow and the development of the baby, right? So that was about the umbilical cord, its abnormalities. If you see it in this picture, is attached surface of the placenta, smooth chorion, and all this is there. And that was about the last topic which we had to talk about in the general anatomy. So we talked about the fetal membrane, placenta, and all the rest. Chorionic membrane we talked about the allantois, amniotic cavity. We've talked importance because that was a very important one. It also participates in the formation of the tests. So that is why we talked about it in detail, and because the amniotic cavity is attached with it, with the formation of the umbilical cord. So we added a few words about the development of the umbilical cord as well, and what can be abnormalities. The placenta is not that much related with you BDS people, so we won't talk about that. Next time, inshallah, we'll start with this special development. We have gone through all stages, all the steps of the development of the normal development or the generalized development of the baby. Now we're going to talk about the specialized portions, how different portions from where what is developing from the ectoderm, what is developing from the mesoderm, and what is developing from the endoderm. So you should have an idea what structure was where and how is it going to develop. So we're just going to talk about what all you need in the development of the head and neck. So that is going to be the part. Next time, inshallah, we'll start with the development of the skull, the bony portion. We talk about the muscles, we're going to talk about the bone and all and the abnormalities which can occur because of that. Okay, ji. Thank you. Princess, formation of the umbilical cord. So now it should be very clear about the amniotic bands that mostly results in the oligohydramnias. So what is the significance? How do you assess by ultrasound? And don't do even amniocentesis by the ultrasound and by the fundal height checking. You can assess whether the amniotic fluid is in a normal level or it is a polyhydramnias, because if it is a polyhydramnias, the fundal height will be too high, not matching with the dates of the pregnancy. Oligohydramnias, it will be less. So that you can assess. So mostly they said idiopathic causes, it can be. So what all you have to remember is why when it is taken in, the circulation has to be very clear. When you know the circulation, it is swallowed to any defect which is nervous in control, that is CNS development or your gastrointestinal tract. It will not be taken in by the baby, so it's going to lead to a polyhydramnias. If the urine is kidney has something malformation, the kidney is not forming normal urine amount, because at the 10th to 11th week it is majority is by the urine contribution, it's going to lead into oligohydramnia. So all these factors you should understand. So if it is the swallowing or the circulation of the amniotic fluid, that if you understand that, that will help you understand. If it is maternal hypertension, vessels become narrowed of the mother, they cannot, fluid cannot be diffused through those vessels into the amniotic cavity, so the amount can be less. So all these factors, they play a role in the malformation and normal formation of the amniotic cavity. And that is a very important topic, that is the amniotic fluid. And what is amniocentesis? Amniocentesis, many tests are done by inserting a needle and taking small amount of the amniotic fluid. Then I told you the different functions, so you can see a lot of functions are being performed. Okay, that's there. Okay, Ji. Thank you.